Lyra sat alone at the far end of the station platform, her thin arms wrapped tightly around her legs. The cold metal floor bit through her worn clothes, but she did not move. Around her, the spaceport buzzed with noise and life. Humans hurried to catch departing shuttles. Cargo bots rolled on humming wheels, carrying crates marked with warning signs. Loudspeakers called out flight numbers in a flat robotic voice. But no one came near Lyra. No one even looked at her. She had been there for hours, maybe days. Time had stopped meaning anything to her. She only sat, staring at the cracks between the floor panels, letting the voices and footsteps blur together until they sounded like the wind from long ago. Everyone knew who she was, and they stayed away. They called her the Broken One. Some whispered she was dangerous. Others said she was hopeless. She had survived the Great War between her kind and the human colonies, but survival had not been victory. It had left her hollow. She was the last of her people on this station, maybe the last anywhere. Her homeworld was gone, burned until its oceans boiled and its skies turned black. Her family had vanished into fire and smoke. Her people had been known for their beauty once. Their silver hair had shone like moonlight, and their skin had glimmered with soft colors under starlight. Lyra's hair was now tangled and dull. Her once luminous skin had faded to pale gray. Her eyes still glowed faintly blue, but they were tired eyes that had seen too much pain. She barely ate. The station gave her leftover food sometimes, cold and tasteless, and only when someone remembered she was alive. Most of the time she just sat there in silence. Even her voice seemed broken now. She had not spoken a word in weeks. People passed her every day. They turned their faces away when they walked by. They whispered cruel words when they thought she could not hear. "She's too damaged," they said. "She'll never be normal. Don't go near her. She's trouble." They thought she could not hear them. She could, she just no longer cared. Their words washed over her like cold rain. Once their words would have burned her. Now they meant nothing. She felt like a shadow, empty, invisible, drifting through a world that no longer had a place for her. Sometimes at night she would remember who she had been. She had been fast and clever, running through crystal forests under 3 moons. She had laughed. She had dreamed. She had believed in the future. Those memories felt like stories from another life. The girl she had been was gone, buried under layers of fear and silence, and yet, something deep inside her refused to die. A tiny spark of who she had been still glowed quietly in her chest. It was small, fragile, like a candle in a storm, but it was there. That spark was the only reason she still came to the platform each day. Some part of her hoped for something, though she did not know what anymore. That evening, as the station's artificial sun dipped below the horizon glass, the air changed. The lights dimmed to soft orange and the crowd began to thin. Lyra kept staring at the floor, lost in her thoughts, when she felt something strange. A stillness, a presence. Someone was watching her. It was not the usual stare full of fear or disgust. This gaze was steady, calm, curious. She lifted her head slowly. Across the platform stood a human man. He was not like the others. He did not wear polished boots or a sharp uniform. His coat was simple and travel-worn. Dust clung to his boots like he had walked a long way. His face was quiet, his eyes steady, and there was no fear in them. For a moment, neither of them moved. The noise of the station faded into a soft hum. She expected him to look away, the way they all did. He didn't. He kept looking at her, not at the broken alien, not at the dangerous survivor, but at her. Her heart gave a tiny flutter, startled and confused. She quickly looked away, waiting for the moment to break. People always left. No one stayed. But when she glanced back, he was still there. The departure bell rang, and the other passengers hurried toward their shuttles. The man stayed where he was, and then he did something no one had ever done. He walked toward her. His footsteps were slow, careful, as if he didn't want to scare her. Lyra froze. Fear coiled in her chest like a cold snake. What did he want? Why was he coming near her? He stopped a few feet away. The world seemed to hold its breath, and then he did something even stranger. He held out his hand. It was such a simple gesture, but it struck her like thunder. No one had touched her since the war. No one had even tried. Lyra stared at his hand as if it were a trick, a trap, a dream. For the first time in years, someone saw her and reached for her. Lyra did not move. She stared at the man's outstretched hand as if it were something from a forgotten dream. Her body was frozen between fear and longing. She could not remember the last time anyone had come this close without flinching. The man stood still, not rushing her. The station around them was growing quieter now, the last shuttles leaving with blasts of steam. The crowd had thinned, and the cold evening lights cast long shadows across the platform. For the first time, Lyra felt as if she and the man were standing in their own small world, cut off from everything else. "Are you cold?" he asked gently. His voice startled her. It was deep but soft, like the calm rumble of a distant storm. She opened her mouth to answer, but no sound came. Her throat felt locked. She lowered her gaze to the floor again. He did not walk away. Most people left when she stayed silent. This man didn't. He simply lowered himself to sit on the cold metal floor across from her. It was such a strange thing to do that she blinked in surprise. Humans hated the cold floors of the station. Yet here he was, sitting quietly, his elbows resting on his knees as if they were two ordinary people just sharing the same space. "My name is Kale," he said after a moment. "I just arrived from the outer belts. I don't know anyone here." Lyra kept her eyes on the ground, but her ears caught every word. His voice carried no sharpness, no hidden threat. He spoke as though he expected nothing from her. Silence stretched between them, but it did not feel heavy like usual. It felt calm. Kale pulled a small packet from his coat. He opened it and took out a steaming bread roll. The smell drifted across the cold air, warm and rich. Lyra's stomach clenched painfully. She had not eaten all day, Kale noticed. He tore the bread in half and held out one piece toward her. Her eyes flicked to it, then back to his face. No one ever offered her food. Not without strings. Not without whispers. She waited for him to laugh, to pull it back, to call her a beggar. He did none of that. "It's just bread," he said simply. Her thin hands trembled as she reached out. She took the bread slowly, carefully, as if it might vanish. When her fingers brushed his, a spark of warmth shot through her chest. She nibbled at the bread. It was soft, warm, and real. She had almost forgotten the taste of real food. Kale didn't stare while she ate. He just looked out at the emptying station like a traveler resting on a long road. That made her feel safe in a way she didn't understand. When she finished, she whispered something without meaning to. "Thank you." The word was faint, cracked from disuse, but Kale heard it. He smiled. Not the sharp smiles of the station guards, not the cold, polite smiles of passing merchants, but a small, real smile that reached his eyes. "You're welcome," he said. Lyra's chest ached. She could not remember the last time anyone had said those words to her. Kale stood and offered his hand again. "Come on," he said. "This place will freeze when the heat cycles drop. There's a warm deck not far from here." Lyra stared at his hand. Her mind screamed to stay where she was. This platform had been her prison, but it was also her shield. If she followed him, everything would change. But something deep inside her, the small spark that had refused to die, flickered brighter. Slowly, shakily, she placed her hand in his. His hand was warm, steady, alive. Kyle helped her stand. Her legs wobbled from sitting too long. He stayed close but not too close, letting her choose the space between them. They began walking through the quiet station. People passing by glanced at them with open shock. No one had seen anyone walk beside the broken alien before. Some whispered. Others frowned. Kale ignored them. Lyra kept her eyes on the floor, but she felt something strange creeping into her chest. A tiny thread of hope. When they reached the warm deck, heat lamps glowed like small suns. The air smelled of oil and old metal, but it was warm. Kale led her to a corner where a faded blanket lay on a bench. "You can rest here," he said. Lyra sat slowly, watching him. She did not understand why he was doing this. No one ever helped without wanting something. What did he want? Kale seemed to read her fear. He crouched to meet her eyes. "I don't want anything," he said softly. "You just looked lonely." Her throat tightened. The word struck deep. Lonely. Yes. She had been lonely for so long it had become her world. Kyle stood. "I'll be nearby, if you want to talk, or if you just want to sit." Then he walked a short distance away and sat down with his back to her, giving her space. Lyra curled under the blanket. The warmth wrapped around her like something she had forgotten existed. She watched him from the corner of her eye as her body slowly relaxed. For the first time in years, she felt safe enough to close her eyes. And as the hum of the station sang softly around her, the broken girl on the edge of the world drifted into her first peaceful sleep. Lyra woke to the soft hum of the heat lamps. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The bench beneath her was warm. The thin blanket still covered her shoulders. She blinked, eyes adjusting to the dim orange glow of the warm deck. The silence around her felt strange, too gentle, too safe. Then she saw him. Cale sat a short distance away, his back against the wall, head tilted slightly as he dozed. A small light flickered from the console beside him. His breathing was slow and even, like someone who trusted the world enough to sleep in it. Lyra stared at him, puzzled. No one ever stayed. Yet he had. A sharp knot of fear twisted in her stomach. This had to be a trick. Everyone wanted something. Sooner or later he would reveal what he truly wanted. That was how people worked. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself as if it could protect her from disappointment. Her thoughts spun in circles. Why was he being kind? Did he know who she was? Maybe he didn't. Maybe he hadn't heard the stories. The lies about how she had betrayed her own kind, how she was cursed, how she carried death wherever she went. Or maybe he had, and simply didn't care. That thought made her chest ache in a strange, painful way. Cale stirred, blinking awake. When his eyes found hers, he smiled, small, quiet, as if he were glad she was still there. "Morning," he said. Lyra looked away quickly. Her voice trembled out without her meaning to. "Why are you here?" Cale stretched his arms lazily. "Because I wanted to be," he said simply. The answer made no sense. People didn't choose to be near her. They avoided her like she carried a disease. "Don't you know what I am?" she whispered. Cale tilted his head. "You're someone who was cold. Now you're warm. That's enough for me." Her throat tightened. He spoke as if her past didn't matter, as if she wasn't a ruin. No one had ever done that. They sat in silence for a while. Lyra watched him from the corner of her eye. Cale pulled a small device from his coat, an old music player. He tapped it and soft notes floated into the air, gentle, low like ripples in a dark pond. The sound pulled at her memories. Her people had once made music like that before the war. She saw flashes of her mother's smile, of dancing under the moonlit trees. The memories stabbed like broken glass, and she turned her face away. "Too loud?" Cale asked quietly, reaching to turn it off. She shook her head quickly. "No, it's nice." Something in his eyes softened. He let the music play. Hours passed like that. Cale did not ask questions. He did not try to make her talk. He only sat nearby, sometimes humming with the music, sometimes sketching on a small data pad. The silence between them began to feel different, less like emptiness, more like space where something new could grow. Still, fear clung to her like a shadow. Every small kindness felt like a blade waiting to cut. At one point, she stood abruptly. "I should go." Cale looked up but didn't move to stop her. "If you want," he said calmly. "But you can stay if you like." The choice confused her. People usually forced her either to leave or to obey. He was doing neither. Her legs trembled. She sank back down on the bench, confused by her own choice to stay. Cale only nodded and returned to his sketching, as if it didn't matter either way. For the first time in years, someone gave her the power to decide. That night, as the station lights dimmed again, Lyra lay awake staring at the ceiling. She hated how much she wanted to trust him. Trust was dangerous. Trust had gotten her people killed, but Cale's presence was steady like gravity. Quiet, constant, pulling her without force, and deep inside, behind the thick wall she had built to survive, something small and trembling stirred, something that wanted to believe she was still worth saving. Lyra had always believed silence was safety. Silence made her invisible. Silence kept people from asking questions she could not answer. But silence also made her feel hollow, like a ghost trapped in a world that had already forgotten her. Days passed quietly on the warm deck. Cale never pushed. He always stayed nearby, but never too close. Sometimes he brought food, warm broth, soft bread, dried fruits. Sometimes he brought small things he found in the market. A cracked glass bead, a smooth stone from a distant moon, a bent music coin that still played faint songs. He offered them without words, setting them beside her like gentle offerings to a wild creature. Lyra accepted them silently at first, but she found herself waiting for him each day, watching the doorway until his familiar shape appeared. She told herself it was only because of the food, but deep inside she knew it was something else. One quiet evening, while the heat lamps hummed softly and the market outside grew still, Kyle sat cross-legged on the floor, cleaning the inside of an old data pad. Lyra watched him from her bench, her eyes tracing the steady motion of his hands. Her voice surprised even herself when it broke the silence. My planet had 3 moons. Kyle paused, his hand stilling. He didn't look up right away, as if giving her time to change her mind. Then he spoke gently. What were they like? Her fingers twisted in the blanket. They were beautiful. They danced across the sky. Sometimes all 3 rose together and the seas would glow. She stopped, throat tightening. She had not spoken of her world since it died. The words felt like sharp glass in her mouth. Kale finally looked up, his eyes calm and warm. That sounds magical, Lyra blinked. No one had ever said that about her world. Most humans only called it the wasteland now, a graveyard of ash and bone. They destroyed it, she whispered. Kale nodded slowly, not with pity, but with quiet understanding. I know. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she forced them back. She hated crying. Crying had made the soldiers laugh when she was taken from the ruins. Everyone I loved is gone, she said, her voice cracking. And they said it was my fault. That I ran. That I should have died with them. Kale set down the datapad. He didn't speak right away. He just sat still, letting her words hang in the warm air. Then he said softly, Surviving isn't betrayal. It's courage, she stared at him. The sentence felt like sunlight breaking through black clouds. No one had ever called her brave. Her walls shuddered. I'm not brave, she said. I'm broken, Kyle shook his head gently. Broken things can still be beautiful. Sometimes more beautiful because they survived what others couldn't. Her heart thudded painfully. She wanted to believe him. She wanted it more than she wanted air, but fear clawed inside her. What if he was lying? What if this kindness was just another trick, and he would leave when she needed him most? She pulled the blanket around herself tightly, trying to hide from her own hope. Kyle didn't press her. He simply leaned back against the wall and let the quiet return, as if her confession had not changed anything between them. That steadiness was more comforting than any promise. Later, when the deck lights dimmed and the hum of the station softened into night, Kyle stood and stretched. I'll keep watch, he said. Sleep, Lyra shook her head. You don't have to. I know, he said. I want to. Something fragile shifted in her chest. She curled on the bench again, her mind spinning with images, her moons, her family, fire, screams, silence. And Kale sitting nearby, silent and solid as stone. As sleep slowly pulled her under, she realized something terrifying. She no longer felt completely alone, and that small crack in her darkness scared her more than the darkness ever had. Lyra had never planned to stay this long. In her mind, Kale's kindness was only a passing spark, something that would fade like everything else. Yet days kept unfolding like fragile leaves and he was still there. He never asked about her scars. He never pushed her to speak. He just kept showing up, always steady, always calm. And slowly, something strange began to happen. The silence around her no longer felt like a wall. It felt like space. Space where she could breathe. Space where she could exist without fear of being struck or chased away. That morning, Kale brought something new, a small box of colored sand from a distant desert moon. He poured it gently onto the table between them. The grains shimmered like tiny stars. Lyra stared. The soft glow reminded her of the seas on her homeworld under moonlight. Kyle smiled a little. Want to try? He picked up a thin stylus and drew a spiral in the sand, then pushed the box gently toward her. Lyra hesitated. Her hands shook as she reached out. Touching something delicate felt dangerous, like a promise she wasn't allowed to make. But she pressed the stylus into the sand. The grains shifted under her touch, smooth and soft. She drew a small curve, then another. Soon a shape began to appear, 3 circles overlapping slightly, glowing faint blue where the grains caught the light. Kyle watched silently. When she finished, he said, 3 moons? Her throat tightened. She nodded. "It's beautiful," he said softly. The words struck her like warm light. No one had called anything she made beautiful since before the war. Her heart fluttered painfully, but not from fear this time. From something else. She looked up. Cale wasn't smiling with pity. He was looking at her the way people look at the stars, like she was something rare and worth seeing. A soft breath escaped her chest. For the first time in years, she smiled. It was small, shaky, almost unsure, but it was real. Kyle's eyes widened slightly as if he knew how rare this was. He didn't make a big moment of it. He just smiled back, quiet and warm, like he was smiling at the sunrise. The moment passed, but its glow stayed inside her. Later that day, Cale fixed a broken heater on the deck. Lyra watched from her bench as he worked. He hummed to himself, soft and low. She found herself listening, curious about the melody. Without thinking, she hummed a soft note in reply, a tone from her people's old moon songs. Cale froze. He turned his head slowly. "That was beautiful," he said. Color rushed into her pale cheeks. She hadn't meant to do it. "It's just a sound," she whispered. "It's you," Cale said simply. Her heart gave a sharp, confused ache. That night, when the deck lights dimmed, Lyra surprised herself again. She took the blanket from the bench and walked toward him. Cale sat by the wall, his coat pulled around him for warmth. Without speaking, she held the blanket out. Cale blinked. "For me?" She nodded. He accepted it slowly, like he knew how much this small gesture cost her. "Thank you," he said quietly. Lyra sat across from him, hugging her knees. For a long moment, they just sat there, watching each other across the thin stretch of floor. Something was changing. She could feel it like a slow sunrise inside her chest. It was terrifying. And beautiful. She was still broken. She still carried all her ghosts. But now, when she looked at Cale, the weight on her chest felt just a little lighter. As she closed her eyes that night, her last thought was a fragile one, a thought she hadn't dared believe in for years. Maybe she wasn't beyond saving. Maybe she was beginning to come back to life. Lyra had thought she understood pain. She had lived with it for years. The sharp pain of hunger, the dull ache of loneliness, the silent weight of being unwanted. Those pains had become part of her bones, familiar and predictable. But this new feeling was worse, because this pain had hope buried inside it. Every time Cale smiled at her, something warm and soft bloomed in her chest, and immediately twisted with fear. Every time he came back through the doorway, her heart leapt, then sank. Terrified he might not come back next time. Caring about someone felt like standing on a thin bridge over a bottomless void. That evening, Cale returned late from the markets, his coat dusted with frost from the outer docks. Lyra had been sitting by the door, waiting without meaning to. When he appeared, relief crashed through her so hard it almost hurt. "You're late," she whispered before she could stop herself. Kyle blinked at her, surprised. "Were you worried?" Her face flushed. She turned away. "No." He gave a small amused smile but didn't tease her. Instead, he unpacked his bag and handed her a folded cloth bundle. Inside were small round fruits on deep red, glowing faintly from the cold. "They grow on the ice moons," he said. "Took some convincing to get them." Lyra picked one up gently as if it might melt. She bit into it. Sweet juice burst on her tongue, sharp and alive. Tears pricked her eyes before she could stop them. She wiped them away quickly, hoping he hadn't noticed. But he had. He said nothing. Only gave her that same quiet smile that seemed to see right through her walls. And that was when the fear hit her full force, because she realized how much she wanted him to stay. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay curled on the bench, staring at the ceiling while the heat lamps hummed. Her thoughts spun in frantic circles. What if he leaves? What if someone tells him the stories about her? The ugly lies the soldiers spread to make people hate her. What if he believes them? Everyone leaves. The thought clawed at her until her chest hurt. At some point, she slipped from the bench and padded softly to where Cale slept against the wall. He had draped the blanket she gave him around his shoulders. His head was bowed, his breathing steady. She crouched a few feet away, just watching. She hated herself for needing this. Her hands trembled. It would be safer to run, safer to leave before he could hurt her, before she could need him too much, but she didn't move. Instead, a whisper escaped her lips like a secret she wasn't meant to say. "Please don't go." Kale stirred slightly but didn't wake. She crept back to her bench and buried her face in her arms. Heart pounding, the next morning she tried to push him away. When he greeted her, she stayed silent. When he offered food, she turned her face. When he asked gently, "Are you all right?" she muttered, "Leave me alone." Kyle watched her quietly for a moment. Then he nodded. "Okay," and he actually stepped back. He gave her space instead of pressing closer. That shook her more than anything. Everyone else she had known had forced closeness or fled from her. Kale did neither. He simply gave her the choice. All day she watched him from the corner of her eye as he fixed a broken heater coil. He hummed softly under his breath. Her chest ached with guilt. By evening, she couldn't stand the silence between them. She crossed the floor and sat near him, not touching but close enough to feel the warmth from his shoulder. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Kale looked at her, eyes calm and warm as always. "You don't have to be," she shook her head. "I get scared when things feel good, because good things go away." Kale set down his tools. "Maybe, or maybe, they stay if you let them." Lyra stared at him, the words wrapped around her like fragile light. Something inside her cracked again, not in pain this time, but in surrender. She wanted to believe him. She wanted it so badly it hurt, and maybe, just maybe, she was starting to. Lyra had always believed her life would end in silence. She thought she would fade away like a forgotten shadow on the cold metal platform where she had been left. That had felt safer than hoping. But Kale had changed everything. He had walked into her silence and refused to run. He had given her warmth, food, space, and something far more dangerous: hope. And hope, she had learned, hurt more than hunger ever could. For days she wrestled with it, her heart caught between wanting him close and pushing him away. She knew it couldn't last. People like him didn't stay. People like her weren't meant to be saved. That evening, the station loudspeakers announced a new shuttle arriving from the inner colonies. A shuttle bound for the core worlds, rich and safe and bright. Kale stood at the edge of the warm deck, watching the crowds gather for it. His pack was already by the door. Lyra's heart clenched. Of course, he would go. Why wouldn't he? He was human, unbroken, full of life. She was just a scar wrapped in skin. She tried to make her voice steady. "You're leaving." Kale turned, eyes calm. "There's work waiting for me in the core." Her throat closed. She forced out a whisper. "Then go." The word stabbed like a blade. Kale studied her for a long moment. Then he walked closer, slow and quiet. "Is that what you want?" he asked gently. Lyra couldn't answer. Her hands curled into fists in her lap. She wanted to scream yes and to push him away before he could break her. But her body betrayed her. Tears spilled hot down her cheeks. "I don't know how to be someone people stay for," she whispered. Kyle crouched in front of her. His voice was soft, steady as always. "Maybe you don't have to be anyone else. Maybe someone should just stay. For you." Her breath caught. His hand lifted slowly and hovered between them. Open, waiting, not demanding, not forcing. Just waiting. The same way he had on that first night when no one else would even look at her. Her vision blurred with tears. "Why?" she asked. The word cracked. "Why me?" Kale's eyes didn't waver. "Because I see you. Not the lies. Not the scars. Just you." Her heart trembled so hard it hurt. She thought of all the nights she had sat alone, wishing someone would reach for her. All the times she had wanted to vanish because no one cared if she stayed. And now here he was, someone who saw her. Someone who stayed. The world seemed to go silent around them. Lyra's hand lifted slowly, shaking, and for the first time in years, she reached back. Her fingers slid into his palm, cold and trembling. His hand closed gently around hers, warm and steady. The fear didn't vanish, but something stronger rose beneath it, something fierce and bright that she thought she had lost forever. Life. Kale's smile was small, quiet, full of sunlight. "Come with me," he said softly. Lyra let out a shaking breath. She stood. People in the station turned to stare as the broken alien girl walked beside the human man, hand in hand. Whispers followed them, sharp and confused, but she didn't care. For the first time, she didn't feel like a shadow. She felt alive. At the gate, the shuttle door opened with a hiss of warm air. Cale glanced at her. "We don't have to go far," he said. "We can go as far as you want, even if it's just away from here." Lyra looked back once at the cold platform where she had once waited to die. Then she turned away from it forever. Her fingers tightened around his. "I want to go," she whispered. And together, they stepped onto the shuttle, the broken girl who had been forgotten by the world, and the human who chose her anyway. As the doors closed and the stars stretched beyond the windows, Lyra felt the last pieces of her old darkness fall away. She was not invisible anymore. She was not broken beyond repair. She had been chosen, and she had chosen to live.